Ready? Play.
If doesn't exist.
Hello, everybody. We're here for a special episode. I don't quite know how to introduce this episode. It's basically honing in on 5 matches of Rafa's career, more specifically 5 games, and even quite possibly, probably 5 points that had he won those 5 points and had he gone on to win the match, ifs, buts, and maybes, maybe tennis history would be different. Damien, how big an intro was that? Did you like that build up I gave this episode?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a very different strategy to what most people are going for in general. You know, most people, when someone retires, they try to talk about their wins and kind of their, their legacy, their success. But we're actually going to be kind of the what if guys. And that's unique. And I think the intro works with that as well.
I've heard people talk about in football, if, for example, Porto, and this is more for Carlos and Damien than Vanch, if Porto don't score that goal against Manchester United in the last minute and Jose Mourinho runs down the touchline celebrating this very important goal and Porto end up going on to win the Champions League, he gets the job at Chelsea and so on and so forth. How different would football history be? Vanch? Vanch, of course, is gripped to know more about this story. But Vanch, we're not here to talk about Jose Mourinho and that goal that Porto scored in the last minute at Old Trafford. We are here to talk about Rafa Nadal and 5 matches and arguably 5 points. Vanch, do you get the intrigue and the interest when it comes to tennis? And, the millimeters from greatness and ultimate failure is what makes the sport beautiful, right?
Yeah, I mean, they do say this game is a game of millimeters or inches or whatever measurement you want to use. And we do know that Rafa himself says if doesn't exist. But for this show, we're just going to forget about that. Yeah. And we're gonna talk about parallel universes. So
yes,
it's going to be fun.
We are. Yeah, I think so too. Carlos, are you pumped?
Yeah, I actually didn't have a Porto reference in my bingo card for the start of the show. So that's not bad. I guess that's not a bad way to kick things off. But yeah, I'm pretty excited. Really nice to be here around you guys again. And yeah, I mean, the matches that we're gonna discuss and that we're gonna go through, they have some significant historical importance.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, when you kind of pay homage to someone's career, if it's been such an illustrious one, such as Rafa is, you have to go through the highs and the lows. And this maybe is a low for Rafa fans, or these matches maybe are lows for Rafa fans, but they are also, examples of what Rafa brought to the table, for so many years. And, the what ifs are also the intrigue, the mysteries, it's also some of the things that keep us, hooked to tennis. So why not talk about them as well?
Carlos, it was also a conversation you and I had in November last year over a few beers that honed in on one point, and that is going to come up in this show. That's pretty semi-inspired this, because I think we probably spoke about that one point for about 45 minutes, and I thought this could be a show, and now it is going to be a show, albeit we probably won't talk about that one point for 45 minutes, but we'll squeeze all of these sort of 5 inflection points, if you like, into this episode, and we're going to begin with Miami 2005. Thank you, Damien, for highlighting this particular incident. 1 or 2 weeks ago, you brought it up, and I was like, "Wow, that's That's a big moment and definitely has to be included in this episode. And the reason why, well, there's 2 or 3 reasons why. One, Rafa races into a 2-0 lead. He also goes up. This is Miami, by the way, final of 2005 against Roger Federer. Of course, in many ways, Rafa had announced himself and certainly announced himself to Roger the year before by beating him in Miami. This is Miami 2005, so it's 5 sets, which also is a what-if thing. If this is best of 3, Rafa gets the job done, arguably in straights and all the rest of it. But we're going to hone in on the fact that he goes 2-0 up. In those 2 sets, by the way, I just saw the highlights. It wasn't like one-way traffic. There were moments where Roger was on top, even though one of the sets was 6-2. But we get to 2-0 4-1. Roger gets gets the break back. So now we're back on serve. But now we get to the point. Well, actually, before we talk about the point, Damien, what are your thoughts on the match, the first 2.5 sets?
Well, I mean, as you said, the second set was actually really close, but still, obviously, this was quite a big story. The year after that amazing upset, it's not like Nadal really was. Of course, he was progressing from that point, from 2004 Miami to 2005, but still, by the time they made the final, you would think that Federer is going to get the job done. We don't know yet how much of a stain in his record Nadal is going to be and everything, how much he's going to keep haunting him on clay, but also on hard courts over the years. So I think that it was still surprising that it's looking like this, but obviously, Rafa got super close to beating him again. If it is a best of 3, it would all work very differently as well, right? I mean, I never really want to just say, okay, so we cut the remaining 3 sets or something like that, because that's just not how it works with your mental and everything, being ready for the 5 sets and everything. But yeah, I mean, certainly we kind of are arriving at a moment when it looks like Miami 2012, 2004 is just going to repeat itself.
Yeah, right. And Vanch, we actually get to 2-0. This is quite a match for Rafa to end up losing, right?
Yeah, and especially when we look at the whole context of his career in Miami, or maybe perhaps expanding to everything else that he's done. And if we're looking at the one tournament where he hasn't achieved that winning trophy on Sunday, then this has to be the match that you would look back at, just like you would do, for instance, for Roger in 2006 and the Rome final. It's similar, but just the other way around this time. And it would prove to be pretty significant. Especially the point that we're going to reference is going to be key in terms of, well, actually, maybe even a larger context in tennis about what's to come afterwards.
It is, yeah. I mean, as you say, because he never won Miami, it's going to be huge. Anything to add to this, Carlos, in terms of the first sort of 2.5 sets and the significance?
Yeah, not really to the first 2.5 sets, but this is the only final that Rafa has lost in his career after being 2 sets up, if I'm not mistaken.
The only final, yes.
Yes. So this is the only final. Of course, one of the few matches that he has lost, but in terms of finals, this is the only one. I mean, maybe if there had been a Hawkeye in place during this match, maybe he would have won the match, which is also another kind of what if that we can, have put into the table, bring into the table. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the first matches that establishes the future patterns of Rafa versus Roger. The forehand, the cross-court forehand, high spin up to the shoulder of Roger, and the one-handed backhand from Roger. Rafa uses quite a lot. Federer likes that forehand, that it's inside-out forehand. Federer likes it a lot, uses it a lot, but then it goes against Rafa's forehand, so it's not quite as effective. So Roger is constantly trying to solve the puzzle during these 2 sets. Because I remember rewatching this final during the pandemic, and I thought, this is quite a nice, microcosm of what's to come in the Rafa versus Roger rivalry.
Here's Roger Federer against Rafael Nadal, and Federer is trying to escape from a play Rafa is using called the battering ram. The battering ram is where a lefty hammers away cross court at a righty's backhand, and Federer tries to get out of the play by going down the line at Rafa's backhand. Fed actually does get this ball to Rafa's backhand, but Rafa is able to rip a good enough backhand cross court that he forces Federer into a running forehand. It's a decent running forehand, but not incredible, so Rafa is able to take this backhand back down the line to reset the battering ram. From here, Fed has to hit a running backhand and doesn't hit an amazing shot. He kind of leaves it hanging, and now he has to honor the open court forehand from Rafa. Rafa decides to go behind him for an easy winner.
But even though he kind of lost the rivalry or lost the head-to-head in the rivalry, he won this match, which is quite nice for Roger.
Yeah, and so the point we're going to come to, as I said, Nadal gets to 2 sets up and 4-1, but Roger gets the break back for 4th and eventually gets to 4-3. However, we're now at Federer serving 3-4 in the 3rd set, 2 sets to love down, of course, and it's love 30. And there is a shot from Roger on the forehand, Damien, am I right? And you said to me last week it's miles out. It's out. Yeah.
Perfect length shot from Federer, which he thinks was long. 15, baby. An appeal to Steve Ulrich will not be forthcoming. It won't produce anything. Although TMI thinks that Nadal was right.
It's out. Yes, it's out. And of course we do, even though we don't have Hawkeye, we do get the benefit whilst watching on. It's almost like 2024 again, where we're doing all these technology things and we can see what happens. And people are going, why are they not changing? Go on, Carlos. You want to say something?
I have to add something because I was rewatching one article that I wrote. Rafa was 4-1 up in the 3rd set. He was a breakup in the 3rd set.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, he is 4-1 up. Then Roger gets a break back.
That's
3-4.
right.
4-3 for Rafa, and he also kind of has the chance, if everything goes right, if there's Hawkeye and everything, he would have the chance to go a breakup again. But it's like he had like this kind of 2 advantages within the 3rd set.
Sure. So it's love 30. Federer hits the ball long. If Hawkeye was working and everything else in place, then it would have become love 40 with Roger serving at 3-4. And I think the stats fancher are like 80-20 in favor of the likelihood of a break at this point, something like that. If player A is playing player B, and of course there's a million other factors involved, but if we just look at that, so the likelihood is that he goes on to break. How significant do you think is this point in both players' trajectories, both players, and in terms of the match?
Well, in terms of the match, it's very significant. I think if he wins this point, it's very likely that he ends up winning the title and he has a Miami, title in his CV. So from that standpoint, yes, it would have been interesting to see what that 2-0 head-to-head would have then done to Roger. Whether he would have, maybe we don't know. Maybe he wins the Rome 2006 match then, or maybe it's maybe then there's another match that Rafa wins, maybe in 2017. Like there's no, like we just don't know what would have happened. Like that's the thing about this is the butterfly effect as well. Like just because you change one thing doesn't mean like the rest will just play out exactly like how it played out originally. So I think that's the fun part about this too. But in the context of this match, yeah, I definitely think this was it, because I do think he probably wins it from here.
I mean, the obviously going from, instead of love 30 to love 40, it becomes 15-30. Roger holds. Roger goes on to take the set, and there was a huge momentum swing. So much so that by the 5th set, it did feel a bit painful, even now watching it, knowing what the result was. Rafa was way off it, and Roger goes on to win the match. So it does come to these two questions that I would like to ask all three of you. I've got a feeling where Vanch is going on it, but I'll come to you first, Damien. If Nadal wins this point, does he win the match?
Very likely, yes. I mean, not much more to add there. Yeah, it's just love 40. Federer isn't playing all that well up until that moment. Yeah, it's very likely that on the next few points he makes an error. In fact, I think there's even a point that's pretty good at 30 all later that game, where like he is at the net and barely defending himself, and Rafa can do a bit more with the pass but doesn't. So yeah, I mean, it's very, very likely that Nadal would have at least served for the match. Then again, of course, maybe he breaks back, and as we saw, I mean, eventually in that match, he wins the third set, Federer, and the match dies just like right away. So it didn't actually take all that much for Nadal to just break down, which is something that over later in his career didn't really happen anymore. But that maybe can tell you that, okay, if maybe Federer gets broken here but then breaks back, maybe something similar happens. But yeah, I mean, my answer is just very likely yes.
What do you think, Carlos? Does he win the match?
Yeah, I can't add that much to what both of these guys said. I think Rafa was in a prime position of winning that match. And yeah, love 40, considering the amount of looks that he had on Roger's serve up until that point, I think it's very likely that he gets a break and then 5-3. It's kind of a big mental baggage for him to completely drop. I think he wins it, yes.
Yeah. Vanch, what do you think?
Yeah, not much more to what I said before. I would say yes. Yeah, I think he wins it from there.
I mean, of course, he does. Again, we don't know because we don't know. He does end up holding serve in the next service game because they do end up going to a tiebreak, don't they? But yeah. So I think we're all pretty much in conclusion that somewhere in the probably to very likely range, he does go on to win the match. How much of a legacy or tennis history changer is it, Vanch? Like, if he does win this match and therefore the title.
I don't know if it's a hugely massive one in the overall context of like maybe bigger matches like Wimbledon or an Australian Open or something like that. It would just get him one more Masters closer to a career Golden Masters, which is obviously something that like Djokovic has over both Federer and Nadal. Like he's done that twice, winning all 9 Masters 1000s. Whereas for Roger and Rafa, there's a couple that they haven't won. So this would have put Nadal one step closer to it. But again, that's not probably a goal that he had in mind in 2005 or even, in the 2000s. Like this only really became a thing later. And I think Masters 1000 started to grow, become, bigger like in stature in the sport. And that's when you could only really sort of go for something like that and achieve it. So I think, but yeah, it is a bit of a career changing thing in the sense that he would go on to reach 4 more Miami finals and then not win any of them. So if you were to look at one that he got the closest, although there was a pretty well played one in 2011 between Djokovic and Nadal as well, which Djokovic ends up winning in a third set tiebreak. But I think this is probably the one that sticks out even more so because the other 3 finals, the one to Roger, the one to Novak in 2014, 2017 Federer, and then 2008 Davydenko, like none of those he was very close to winning at all. So this is absolutely the one in terms of Miami.
Carlos, history changer, legacy, big deal or not?
Yeah, I think it would have been a nice one for Rafa fans, but I mean, if I look at the big picture, I don't think this is a painful loss at all. Especially considering that Rafa had already beaten Roger at Miami, in Miami the year before. So I don't think it's a very significant match in terms of the rivalry. I do think it would have been nice to have won Miami at least once in his career. I think that's something that everyone, I think, kind of agrees on. But even if he had won one Miami, he wouldn't have the Golden Masters.
No.
So he's lacking another Masters 1000. So if winning this match would have meant completing the Golden Masters, then maybe yes, it's kind of a big deal because it's something that you don't have Djokovic ahead of you in this in terms of the GOAT debate and stuff. But considering that he would have need another Masters 1000, I don't probably out of the 5 that we're going to discuss, I think this is the least important in terms of legacy wise. I think.
Okay, Damien.
Legacy wise, for guys like this with 20-ish slams, these events do not matter whatsoever, like really. And the fact that he hasn't won Miami is not something that is going to keep him up at night. Definitely not. I think the 0-5 record is like a good example of a stat that, yes, it looks amazing. And of course, we're going to keep talking about it. But even the like the Golden Masters or whatever, like no one outside of tennis actually cares about if you've won all the Masters. I'm not even going to start on my Djokovic hasn't won Hamburg propaganda. But no, I think in the long run, because he only won the current.
Oh yeah, let's not go
Masters,
down that
right?
road.
Because it used to be 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Federer and Nadal did, of course. But anyway, that's not important right now. What is important is that, I just don't think Rafa will even if he thinks back to this match right now, I don't think he's gonna feel any like pain or I should have won this. He's just gonna be like, that was just a good battle. I remember that. He probably will have fond memories rather than anything else, which I don't think will exactly be true for the rest of the matches. And I will agree with Carlos that, especially because the other matches we're gonna be talking about are going to be slams.
Yeah.
I've kind of given a sort of a score of 4 out of 5 likely that he goes on to win the match, let's say, from this particular point, and somewhere around about the 1.5 to 2 out of 5 in terms of legacy importance. I think Damien will be closer to 1.
Yeah, I think you could go 1 as well.
Let's go
but
1.5.
I would like to say 4.5 on the likelihood, I think, because if you're gonna give it like, I don't know, what would you give the 5 to then? Like if someone would have a match point from that, I guess. But like this is, I would say like 4.5 on the likelihood. But on the importance, yes, I would be close to the bottom of the scale.
Let's go. I'm going to... anyone really object to 4 out of 5 on the likelihood? Yeah.
No, I think that's a first call. Yeah.
Yeah, I think 4 out of 5. And then we'll give it 1.5 in terms of importance and legacy. But you're right. We're going to come to much bigger issues and occasions for sure. So let's get to the next one. Australian Open final 2012. Novak Djokovic against Rafa Nadal. Djokovic probably went into the match as the favorite. However, it was Nadal who would win the first set. They would exchange breaks. And so Nadal actually went up an early break, but that was seeded before Nadal sort of snatched it somehow at 7 to win it 7-5. Second set was kind of quite similar, nip and tuck. This one went the way of Novak. The third set was just a dismantling, and this was Novak powering away from Rafa in only probably the only way that Novak could, compared to his peers. A demolition or dismantling, really, and it was 6-2, and very much the ascendancy was with Novak at this point. The fourth set was close. I think Nadal had to save 3 break points at one point. I think he was down love 40. Eventually, it goes to the tie break. And Rafa, I remember his celebration upon winning that tie break. Just like cannot believe that he's very much in this match, and maybe even going into that fifth set, maybe even would feel a bit of momentum and maybe even feel the favorite. So compared to where he was, particularly in that third set, somehow now he finds himself in with an incredible chance of winning his second Australian Open title. That chance is only going to get further increased as he gets the early break, and he gets to 3-2, 30-15 on his serve. Before we talk about the point in question, anything you would like to add, Damien, to those first 4.5 sets?
I think just briefly rewatching it today, I think the second set was just as dominant as the third from Novak. He just kind of Nadal got 1 break back, but it didn't really matter in the end. But yeah, I think we're really entering a pretty crucial one here. Obviously, it's a legendary match, almost 6 hours and everything. And to lose a battle like this, I feel like it's pretty similar to that Miami thing where like right now, Rafa probably looks back at it and is just, proud of even being a part of a match like this. But imagine going off the court and losing something like that. And also, I think a key difference that we're going to be talking about here is that in Miami, the point we mentioned, like Rafa has not much control over it. Of course, he can win the point earlier. He can win the point in 1,000 different ways. But in the end, I mean, he knows the shot is out. He doesn't land it, but that's because, well, it wasn't even within the playing area. And here, it's a shot where everything is on his terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Vanch?
Yeah, to me, this is a lot bigger than the previous one we discussed. But like this one is huge because he's up 4-2, 30-15. He was serving first as well, so he's basically like 2 holes. He's got the backhand down the line completely lined up. Djokovic is not within reach to really cover it at the net, and it's a shot that probably 95 times out of 100 he's gonna make very, very comfortably.
In 2012, he had breakup in the fifth.
Yeah.
And the 30-15, I
Yeah.
don't remember well. It was a ball very close, goes up. But this is what happened. There was
But obviously the tension of the occasion and the match and just how physical this match also was, to where Djokovic was really depleted physically because he had all the momentum, like you were saying. He had the 3 big points in the fourth set, and then Nadal just like sheer guts, determination, willpower, like how somehow it manages to win that fourth set in a tie break. And so at this point, yeah, it's this is where it was much more in his racket than let's say the Miami line call, where
Yeah, it was actually 4-2. I think I said 3-2 just now, but I think he was 4-2 up
4-2.
30-15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4-2, 30-15. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the point you make there, Damien, about, or both of you made about the physicality of it, because I do think the way he's having to contort his body for what is a fairly routine shot, Vanch, in that it's, he should, and he sort of just immediately looks to the sky, doesn't he, and sticks his finger up to challenge, but in a more hope than belief. We're going to come to another one as well like that probably quite shortly. But Carlos, have you got anything to add in terms of this particular point?
Yeah, before we go, we break down this point in question. I think we're gonna be discussing 5 points that meant a lot in terms of Rafa's defeats throughout his career. This one is the biggest miss out of the 5 points I want to talk about. The other points, okay, we will discuss them, of course. But in terms of missing, making an enforced error, kind of bottling it, so to say, this one is the biggest miss. So this adds a greater layer of significance, in my opinion, to this one.
Definitely. Also, but just coming back as well to what you were saying, Vanch, about how tight. I think whether it's mental or physical fatigue or a bit of both, I think just because of he's still got to do something. It's really tricky to getting down. Now, that's not to say that he doesn't win this point 95 times out of 100. I completely agree with that. But you can just see kind of what went wrong, if you like, and how it went wrong and why it went wrong. But he still, should be putting this away. And Damien, you were talking about not staying awake at night and all the rest of it. Well, if there is going to be a point in Rafa's career that's going to keep him awake at night, this would be one of them, one of maybe 2, but we'll discuss that maybe a bit later on. But he should have won this point, right?
Yeah, I think Carlos is right that this is definitely the biggest miss we're going to be talking about. It's a routine shot. I would say even 99 out of 100, he probably makes it. And I think after all these years, it's probably very different. But this is probably the one that really haunted him after the match happened. Of course, he was quick to just win Roland Garros a few months later. So I guess in the end, he actually dealt with it okay. But it was also the one that stopped him from winning the Australian Open. That was a huge story for a while, that, he didn't get that double Grand Slam for a while. Of course, up until 2022. So that was also quite a saga there. So I think, especially after the fact for the next few years, I think this is probably one that he was thinking about a lot. Right now, again, I don't believe he's gonna be staying just thinking, if only I got that one. But I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe he really is sort of that focused on it. After all, it kind of works both ways. Like he gets this slam, you subtract Djokovic one from his count. So it's already 23-23 in this, utopic world where there's no butterfly effect. So
I think in terms of what the people think about both Rafa's and Novak's career, I think the kind of the memories that we have for the general public, maybe not so the hardcore fans, but for the casual fans, I think this is the biggest and the most significant point that we're going to be talking about.
I'm joined by our crisis correspondent, Spartacus Mills. Spartacus, this is huge history happening, isn't it?
It's bigger than that, Chris. It's large. I mean, if you've got a history book at home, take it out, throw it in the bin. It's worthless. The history books now will have to be rewritten. What will they say?
Because this is the biggest match out of Rafa's and Novak's rivalry. I think if you ask anyone here in Spain that has followed Rafa's career through the years and that has followed his rivalry with Novak, you ask him one match that comes to his mind between Rafa and Djokovic, he's going to pick 100% sure that final in Australia, just as he's going to pick Rafa against Roger, Wimbledon 2008, in terms of Rafa against Roger rivalry. Now, in that rivalry against Roger, Rafa wins that match. So it's kind of a huge memory. And I think probably for Rafa fans, the most important win and the biggest win of his career. What if he wins this point, he wins this match, and also the biggest memory out of Rafa and Novak's rivalry is a happy one. And is a one that ends up in a victory. Maybe in terms of GOAT race, probably Djokovic ends up with a bigger amount of slams and with more slams than Rafa. Yes. But in terms of his rivalry, I think it would have been seen kind of differently, not that much, but in a way it would have been seen kind of differently, at least here in Spain, because everyone would go on to remember this match and think, Rafa won the biggest match of his career against Roger, and Rafa won the biggest match of his career against Novak. And it's not the case in this one because Novak won it. So yeah, I guess if we are hardcore tennis fans, so it's maybe not that big of a match for us in terms of the GOAT race. But for the casual fans, at least here in Spain, 100%, everyone would have gone in and say, hey, Rafa won the best match of his rivalry against Federer, and Rafa won the best match of his rivalry against Djokovic. And probably this point, it's not like it seals it, but it would have been a huge step ahead and forward for Rafa.
If we, again, ignoring consequences and everything else, but if we did just simply take one slam away from Novak and add one to Rafa, that would then suddenly be 23-23, but also the head-to-head, instead of being 31-29, would be 30 all. Now, it would just give Nadal fans
30 all, by the way. 30 all. That would be amazing. Yeah, that would be a magical way to finish a rivalry.
It would be, yeah, exactly. And of course, that goes to 30 all from 30-15. Instead of going to 40-15 to Nadal, it goes to 30 all this particular point. And the rest is history because Novak ends up breaking in this particular game and ends up going on to take the match itself. And we all remember them on the chairs afterwards. But this point was huge. So I'm going to come to the two questions again. Vanch, if Nadal wins this point, does he win the match?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes again. I'm going to say yes. Yes again. But what I find extraordinary is that
Miami, but a bit less conviction than Miami, but
a little bit less conviction than Miami, but I would still say yes. But I think what I find extraordinary also is that, this was his 7th time in a row that he lost to Novak, and the rivalry was really flipping, right? Because Djokovic had completely had his number in 2011. But Rafa, even though he loses this match, he manages to actually overcome that defeat pretty quickly and then wins 6 of the next 7 in the rivalry and then makes it 22-15 from 16-14. So I think, that was an extraordinary spell for him the next 2 years to get that, to sort of erase some of those bad memories from 2011 and 12. And then also he wins a similar type of what-if match in the 2013 Roland Garros semifinal against Djokovic, the other way around. So I think, that's also a slam that Djokovic could have won. I know it was a semifinal, but then, de facto final, David Ferrer, all respect to him. But
if we did, I was watching that match or the fifth or parts of that match last night, actually. If we did one on Rafa and the points that basically propelled him to certain situations, the point in that with that t-shirt hanging on the net or when he touches the net.
Yeah.
The point. Yeah.
That was amazing. That's one of the
Oh, it's
no,
a great image. It's a great
yeah,
image.
of Rafa's career for
Yeah.
sure. That one, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And Novak trying to sort of put up a slight argument, but he doesn't give it
Now
much.
he knows deep down, he knows he's not
Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
at that point, being
Because
such
he's like
a
saying the
significant
ball has gone, he's hit the ground and it's gone beyond the court, but it doesn't matter.
But he has to kind of make an argument about it. Of
Yeah.
course, it's because the emotions are running high, you know. But deep down, he knows it. That's why he doesn't make a big fuss about it. You know.
But coming back to Australia, 30-15, Rafa does put that backhand down the line in. Does he win the match, Carlos?
I think he does. Maybe percentage I would give to him is a bit lower than the Miami one, but I think he does. I think 5-2, fifth set, considering the physicality of that match, maybe it's too much of a burden for Djokovic.
It might go deuce, it goes 40-15. It could
Yeah, but
go
it's 2 game points. 2 game points, that's a big edge, So I think he goes, if he wins that point, I think he goes 5-2. I think and it's not like I'm pretty sure about it. I don't know about it, but my guess would be that he goes 5-2 and then 5-2. Even though it's only a break, it's 3 games. It's a 3-game differential. I think that's maybe too much for Djokovic, even though Djokovic's mind has to be studied. So maybe he comes back from that. But I think he would have won that match, yes.
Damien?
Yeah, I mean, less conviction than Miami, sure. But then again, I have to agree with Carlos that like 5-2 in a match like this, after almost 6 hours of play, it's huge. It's much bigger than 5-2 at any other stage of a tennis match. So yeah, if we assume that he's going to win the game, which he's likely to, then yes. So slightly less conviction, but it's still a yes from me.
Are we looking at sort of 3 out of 4, 3.5 out? Sorry, 3 out of 5, 3.5 out of 5.
3.5, maybe.
Yeah.
I would
if we gave that one 4 in Miami, then this one has to be like 3 or 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Or 3.5. I mean.
Yeah, let's go 3.5 then, if he wins that point. And now, again, if we were doing this out of 5, if he wins the match, legacy changing scenarios, it's a 5 out of 5, right? If you're going to give a 5 for anything.
If you're going to, but if you don't have to give a 5 to anything, it's still like 3 for me or something like that. Like
really,
I would give it a 4. I'm keeping that 5. I'm keeping that 5 for another match that very
okay,
well.
yeah. Okay, Vanch.
I'm tempted to go 4, but then I also think Djokovic ends up doing the triple career slam. Like I don't know if 2022 Australian Open happens if he wins this. Like. Plus, he'd also have to win another Wimbledon.
You mentioned whether Rafa's staying awake at night and thinking about this for a long while afterwards. We talk about the tear he went on in 2012, 2013. But 10 years later, when he does finally get over the line, and that does change things, right? So the fact he wins in 2022 does change this legacy thing. But he mentions in his one of his post-match interviews, doesn't he, saying, fuck, break up in the 5th, because that's what he had in 2022. But he was even close because, of course, he was serving for the match at 30 love. Whereas in 2012 and 2017 still have a bit to do. But he was thinking, I'm sure, about those 2 matches in 2022 when he had that advantage and it went away. But anyway, he does get over the line. Shall we collectively give it a 4 out of 5 then? Even if Damien wants to give it a 3?
I'm kind of at a 3.5.
What's your score, John?
Mine is very close to 5.
So if you kind of make that...
That's what I'm thinking. If you go 4, Carlos, I think we're pretty solid on a 4.
It's like we have a 3, 3.3.5, 4, and close to 5. So it's in the range between 3.5.
If you go 4, Carlos, if you go 4, then we've got 4.
Yeah, I go 4 for sure. Yeah.
And we've got 4.
Okay.
Something that I said on like a stream a week ago or something like that is like, still in 10 years, even though Djokovic has the best numbers, no one is just going to say, oh, there was this tennis player 10 years ago, Novak Djokovic. It's just going to be these 3 guys, and one slam here or there. It doesn't really impact that at all.
Well, but the GOAT talks are going to be there forever.
And they're going to be as ridiculous as they are right now,
They are ridiculous to some, but if you debate with arguments and tournaments, hey, this is a big one for that.
Damien, you
debate.
surprised me about a week or two ago, and it wasn't during this particular discussion, because you might be referencing the Twitter space we did. But I remember saying to you a few weeks ago, and I didn't think you would respond in this way. I was like, if Rafa was to win the slam race, but lose every other stat out there, which he pretty much does against Novak head to head and Masters and all the rest of it, weeks at number one. Does Rafa have still a leg to stand on? You were like, yeah, definitely. You win the slam race. It's a very strong argument. It's not necessarily definitive. That's what you said.
I mean, it depends by how much, actually, but I don't remember that at all.
Let's just say it was 22-20 or 23-22 or whatever. But it would certainly give Nadal a case, whereas he now has no case.
Yeah, I mean, it's the strongest possible argument. I don't think it can quite like cover up for everything. Obviously, Rafa has a lot of records that are absolutely phenomenal. But yeah, right now it's just kind of there's no argument for either Federer or Nadal against Djokovic. So.
And he would then have, if he'd won this title, by the way, he would have 7, I think, hard court slams. I mean, it's just another addition for a slam away from Roland Garros. Anyway, I think we've done with this one. Let's move on to 2017. Again, Nadal is up a break in the 5th. Federer takes the first set. So this is the Federer-Nadal Australian Open final of 2017. Carlos, do you remember where you were when this match was taking place? Because I know exactly where I was.
Oh, yeah, I do remember. I was watching Real Betis against Barcelona in the stadium. I didn't watch this match live. I watched it, afterwards.
It must have been a pretty early kickoff then, because this is obviously a Sunday morning.
12 p.m. So I decided to just don't keep track of the scores or social media, because I knew that I wasn't going to watch the match in full. So I decided to just keep it there. I recorded it and then watch it afterwards when I came back from the most beautiful stadium on earth, Benito Villamarin Stadium of Real Betis.
We are in agreement here, Carlos. By the way, there was something else happening in Seville that day, which I was taking part in, which was a half marathon.
So there was a half marathon. It's around that time of the year.
Exactly. Last Sunday of January, normally 3 weeks before the full marathon.
So January.
Yeah. I think I did this half marathon 3 times, and this was the third of those 3. But I wasn't really competing for a particular time. I knew that I was just going to run it, enjoy it. And I even dived into a cafe near the Lacetas, near the Mushrooms. There's one of the millions of cafes there. And I dived in thinking it would be quite funny to dive in and see what the score is between Federer and Nadal. And I dived in because I think I was running with my iPod that particular day rather than my smartphone. So I ran with my iPod, so I didn't have that regular contact with the match. So I just dived in and I was like, oh, Federer's won the first set. Oh, well, anyway, no big deal. I'm sure Rafa's going to come back. Well, Rafa did come back, goes up a double break, loses one of those breaks, but eventually gets over the line in the second set. So they're now 1 set apiece. Federer, though, maybe a bit like Djokovic did back in 2012, dismantled Nadal in the third set, takes a 2-1 lead. Nadal comes back again as only he can. Goes up an early break, really more echoes of 2017, gets to 3-2 and is serving and has 3 points of potential regret, but we're going to hone in, I think, on one, Vanch, in particular that you highlighted just before we started recording. There were 2 forehands, by the way, that Rafa missed, one at 30 all. Goes inches or even less centimeters long, but it does go long. Nevertheless, Rafa gets back to deuce. The one that eventually costs him his serve is a forehand that I think he should make, but he puts it wide.
He's missed it.
But the point we're going to hone in on is that when he has game point, Vanch, right? And he clips the net. And of course, if he wins this point, he wins the game. So this is huge and certainly probably in the top 5 points of Rafa's career in terms of lost points. Yeah. Do you want to add something about the match that I've probably undoubtedly missed as I skimmed over it?
Well, I think, but it was one set all. The first game of the third set was very important because Rafa had, I think, three break points, and Federer hits the same serve three times and aces him out wide. And so I remember that being very crucial because after that, the set was one sided in favor of Federer. But if he loses that game, maybe the set is completely different. But then in the fifth, I think it's a little bit less of like a, oh, for sure guaranteed if Rafa wins this point he wins the match, just because Federer was creating so many chances with his return in the first few Nadal service games of the fifth set. Like the complexion was changing to where, like, he was connecting on his backhand returns. He was actually getting quite a lot of depth. He was pinning Nadal behind the baseline. He was the one attacking like inside the baseline and really kind of making things happen with the or hitting the one hander on the rise, flattening it out, but also just serving well when he had to. So this is definitely a point where Nadal an advantage in, because he was in that favorable cross court to Federer backhand corner, and he did have him kind of in a defensive position, but it wasn't like one where you knew for sure he would win the point from there. But it was one where he was neutral to slightly favored. So I think that's definitely the way it played out. Is it hits the net cord and then it goes wide, but Federer was having to stretch for the backhand. So maybe yeah, maybe he does win that point. He goes up 4-2, but who is to say that Federer doesn't create more chances later on, the way he was returning and just the way he was playing with so much liberty and freedom in general in that fifth set when he just started to go for it. So
Damien?
yeah, I think he would have a slight regret, but it's not nothing like 2012.
Yeah, like kind of both agree and disagree. I mean, for one thing, it's 4-2, so Rafa only needs two holds from there. And if he wins this game, then Roger already has like so many break points, he can kind of just start regretting himself at that point. So maybe there aren't any more chances coming. I don't
Yeah.
know, but yeah, definitely our case here is a bit shaky in that there's no actual like one point there that Rafa really is in control of and loses. This one, it's clear that the rally would have like continued for the most likely. Of course, when it hits the net, it could be like a total dead net cord, but it's not really close to that. So yeah, I mean, we definitely have a very different case here compared to the previous two matches we were talking about. Maybe more so it's just in general being up a break in that set rather than any actual point we can pinpoint. Yeah, any point we can actually like talk about in detail. I think the other forehands, at 30 all, it's maybe a bit of a neutral ball. 30 at break point, then later it's like the third or fourth shot of the rally already. So missing there is acceptable. So yeah, there's just no like specific detail to focus on. But in general, it also connects to 2012, right? I mean, once again, up a break in the fifth, and once again has to wait a long time before he actually gets that second Australian Open title done.
Yeah. Carlos?
Yeah, I think I do agree that there's not such a specific point in this case. And I do agree that maybe Roger could have had a couple of more looks into Rafa's serve, even if Rafa holds and he gets to 4-2. But then we also have to take into context the overall rivalry between Rafa and Roger. I think, Roger mentally, we all know what happened with Roger and breakpoints against Rafa. And we all know that there's always kind of been like a pain in the ass for Rogers fans, breakpoints as a whole theme. So maybe mentally Roger would have kind of said, fuck, it's happening once again. It's happening once again, and I'm having tons of breakpoints. I'm not combating. I'm going to lose a close, tough match, 5-setter after having so many chances. But then again, I think this was a Grand Slam that kind of felt that it was destined for Roger to win. I think it's not gonna hurt Rafa much. If we look at all the 5 matches that we're talking about, I think this is the one that is gonna be the least painful for Rafa because of the nature of his rivalry against Federer and because of what happened with Roger that year and the way Roger was playing. I think, yeah, I mean, it's a fair defeat. Roger felt, we all kind of felt that this was the kickstart for Roger's resurgence, and maybe if he doesn't win the Australian Open, maybe that resurgence doesn't happen. But then again, is that significant for the gold race? I don't think so. So Rafa will be more than happy to give that one to his friend, of course, especially knowing that he also gets a second Australian Open later. But
A couple of things to add to that, I would say, is that also Rafa's now back, because there were also lots of doubts about Rafa for 2.5 years. And yet now we go into the clay court season and the French Open in particular thinking, okay, he's the favourite again. And he does go on to justify that tag. And basically, you know, that doldrums period that Rafa had for 2.5 years had pretty much been put to bed. So it didn't, in a way, especially if it, I mean, maybe if Roger had won that one comfortably, you wouldn't have been quite so convinced. But for both players, it was like, okay, they're both back. I mean, they had a few more matches, of course, that year and over the next couple of years, very much in Roger's favour. There is another point to add that Rafa said afterwards, that he wished that he'd got a few more free points on his serve when he was up a break at 3-2. I mean, actually, there's some good serves in there from Rafa into the body of Roger, but he deals with them pretty well. So that's something to add. I do think, though, that if he wins that point, Vanch, I think the likelihood of him winning the match is probably the same as 2012. And the reason why, if he wins the point, he wins the game. So it's 4-2, done. Okay. If we still don't know for sure that he wins that game in 2012 against Novak. It's 40-15. So 40-15, 4-2 with a break, or 4-2 with a break. And now over to you, Roger. I think that they're fairly equal, you know, because, okay, you're a game closer, but actually you've got the job done with that one particular point.
I think I'll have to slightly disagree with you there, because I think even though it was
we're in a democracy, you're allowed to. There's no authoritarian nature. You'll be invited on again.
Yeah, no. I think you what you're saying is true about the 4-2, 40-15 versus like it being a game point, but I just don't know how likely it is that Rafa wins this point anyway. Like, it's just because, you know, he was in an advantageous position, whereas that one is he had like a clean look at a backhand pass, and that's one that, like Damien was saying, he makes 99 out of 100 times. And I just think if Rafa goes up 5-2, it's really hard for Djokovic to come back from that, just given how physical the match was already, and just just what it means. And I just, you know, with just like it being almost 6 hours and it being potentially 5-2 from there, it looks more done to me than 4-2, when Federer's just playing so free and he has more chances. And like Carlos was saying, it kind of felt like destiny for Federer in a way to win this one, whereas it didn't feel like that at all in 2012. For 2012, it would have been like a huge get for Rafa to.
If he goes up 4-2, though, is it fair to say that at least it's 60-40 in Rafa's favour to win that match?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But it's bigger. But I think the odds would be bigger in Djokovic's match 2012.
Yeah, you can't put it at 50-50. I think both what Vanch said is true, that like, yeah, we're still talking about a point. He's in no way like, you know, guaranteed to win if that shot goes over the net. Plus, even if it's 4-2, I think it's a slightly weaker advantage, not only because it's 5-2 in the Djokovic match, but also, yeah, because of how the match was going. You know, this is like a fifth setter, but it's like, what, 3.5 hours at that point or something, and you're talking about one of the best servers in history, which Djokovic probably by 2012 is not really there yet. And it's
Federer
also
does get another break. Federer doesn't, you know, if we also, just look at it.
I mean, that's another, I guess, argument. Obviously, it's not a guarantee that it would have happened anyway, but he does, and he is 40 love up, I think, in that game. He breaks on the 5th chance. But yeah, that's maybe even more arguments to the fact that he could have created more. But obviously, we can't quite call it a 50-50 when Nadal is 4-2 up. No.
Yeah. So if he wins the point, the likelihood of him winning the match is 3 out of 5, right?
It depends, because if we're looking just like at it in a vacuum, like if he wins this point, then sure. But if we're looking at what actually happened in the point,
for me, this one is, as Damien said, either 2.5 or 3, maybe within that range. You know,
I'm going 3. Vanch, can you go 3?
Sure, I'll go like 2.8.
Yeah.
Depends on what
he's not gonna give you a 3 if you chose.
Like, what's the question?
He's gonna go 225. You know, like 95.
Is the question a specific point, like what we actually see on the court there, or is it just if he wins this point, whatever shape or form?
Exactly, yeah. Because of course it doesn't hit the net core, but Roger gets his racket on it. But whatever, at the end of the point, Rafa ends up winning that point and therefore goes up 4-2.
So if we're not looking at what actually happened on the court in that very point, then I would say 3.
Right. But we can bear in mind what happens in the rest of the match. So we can bear in mind if we live in another universe where we can say, okay, actually, Roger does get a break back, and they end up being, albeit not in that particular game, but he gets a break back later on in the set. But I still think it's a 3.
Three is fine, I think.
3 is good. Yeah, 3 is good with me.
Cool. And legacy changer, we're sort of, I'm thinking 2.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. Or even,
I know Damien's going to want to go like 0.2 or something.
Yeah, I mean, what Carlos said about the destiny, sort of, and that this was destined for Roger. I think he also mentioned earlier that like the Federer-Nadal rivalry, what a casual fan thinks of, is Wimbledon 2008, and like this is the counterpart. This is the foil from Federer's perspective. Like this is literally one of the matches that make his legacy. This is arguably one of the best. I mean, one of the greatest wins of his career. I think, as you know, from kind of my perspective as a Federer fan, definitely the best moment I've ever had following him. Of course, I didn't really get to like witness firsthand the times of 2005 or 6, right? But still, and yeah, I just feel like that really impacts the legacy of Federer so much more than it does Rafa's. And that probably also tells me to say, yeah, like 2, something like that. Again, if he doesn't get Australian Open 2022, we kind of start a different conversation.
Definitely.
But for now, yeah, this is a Federer match rather than a Nadal match.
Absolutely. We're happy with the collective 2, Vanch.
Yeah, for sure. And also, like what John, what you were saying earlier about how this match also indicated that Nadal is back. Like that's true also because he won 2 slams that year, and obviously he also had his own resurgence. He won, you know, sure Federer got the number in the head-to-head, but in the larger scheme of things, I don't think this is going to keep Nadal awake at night.
Was he the sinner? Was he the
actually
sinner
going to
of
be happy.
2017? And Federer was the Alcaraz of 2017.
It was a split, yeah, that year, 2 and 2.
Yeah,
but also
maybe,
the head-to-head, you know, between them.
Yeah.
That's
Federer is the
what
one who had 7 titles, and he had the
yeah,
better win
that
percentage
was
and-
different. Like Federer was actually more consistent.
Although that year, 2017, fueled Rogers' fans' theory that had they played a lot more on hard courts during the years that Rafa was winning the head-to-head against him, the head-to-head would be different. Maybe if Rafa wins that match, that final in Australia, maybe that argument loses a little bit of leverage.
I think that's a very wrong conclusion. Yeah, I think the conclusion should be that, you know, when they played in like 15, 16, 16 maybe not, but
yeah,
even
that was
16,
mine as
15,
well.
16, 17, then yes. But like back in the day, if they played on hard courts, I mean, indoors, yes, Federer always had a good record against him, but like outdoor hard courts up until 2017.
I think the head-to-head is pretty fair, but I do remember lots of Roger fans saying this about the rivalry. You know, when Roger was actually also demolishing Rafa in 2017. I think biggest examples of this are Indian Wells and Miami, not really Australia. So
yeah.
Thanks for tuning into our content. Now you've got this far, can you make sure you hit that subscribe button, also the like and the notification bell? Without your support, we cannot continue to bring you content such as this. Now on with the video. All right, let's go to a different surface. Finally, we're going to go to the grass of Wimbledon. This is the tournament that meant Novak was back, actually. So a nice little return there as well. They exchange sets. They get to the 5th set, they get to 7, all in the 5th set, and Nadal has a break point. I do, though, want to talk about a little bit, just for a couple of minutes, about what happened in the previous 4 or so hours that led to that stage. Vanch, this 2018 semi-final is very much talked about, maybe not quite as much as that 2012 Australian Open final, but it's certainly, you know, needs to be mentioned in the Djokovic-Nadal rivalry, and especially with the way the match panned out.
Yeah, I mean, this was just like the whole match was just so extraordinary, just level-wise from both of them. I mean, just what they were able to produce for 5 hours, 15 minutes, you know, with such, especially just given where they were both at in their career, with Nadal being, you know, very much the best player in the world at that point, and then Djokovic obviously coming, you know, recovering from the elbow surgery, being out of the top 20, heading into the grass court season, saying famously after his loss to Marco Tekinano, "I don't know if I'm going to play on grass." You know, that was his quote. And then then he gets to the final of Queens, comes within 1 point of winning, and then we have this semifinal where he's like seated 12th, and there's low expectations coming in, but then he this is the match that sort of kickstarts his renaissance of in his
Absolutely.
30s, right? For him, when he goes on to win 12 more majors from here, and still active, so we don't know if it'll remain 12. But in this match, I think it's not talked about as much as the 2012 Australian Open one, just because it was a semi-final. It was played over 2 days. It was also overshadowed by just the madness of the Kevin Anderson John Isner 6 hour 36 minute match, and it was kind of just it. It's probably not. I don't think it's appreciated as much, just sheer quality wise, maybe as the other, just because of it not being the final moment. But I would put it right up there in terms of, it's definitely in terms of their, away from their very physical prime years, this was the best I'd seen them play against each other, like point for point, that consistently. The whole match was indoors. That was the thing. Yeah. The whole
That was
thing
the
was
controversy.
indoors. The second day.
That
Yeah.
was
The second
controversy.
day is, it was like, were they going to put it outdoors or indoors? And they decided to keep it consistent and make the whole match indoors. So
Yeah.
that's, which I think helped the quality, actually. That helped the ball striking and just how good it was.
I mean, if even if it was just a 1% swing for Novak with the roof closed, then that would have been enough because it was that close. What Carlos was your thoughts on the previous 4 sets and 14 games before we get to the crucial inflection point?
I don't know this specifically at what point of the match this happens, but there's one point where the graphics team show a statistic. Rafael Nadal amount of winners hit 70 winners. Novak Djokovic amount of winners hit 70 winners.
Wow.
This is as good as it gets between those two guys. This is as good as it gets, especially considering, as Banj said, they weren't in the physical prime of. I mean, you look at this match, it's not like that huge, exhausting, absolutely physical battle that they had. Because if I think about physical battles, I do remember the Australian Open final 2012 and then the US Open final 2011. I think those are the highest in terms of, physicality. These are as good as it gets in terms of physical match. This was more of a ball striking contest. This was about clean, crisp, precise hitting, to the corners, depth as at its best from both. It was such a beautiful contest. I think first set tiebreak was also amazing. I mean, maybe the level wasn't through the roof in that particular point of the match, but there was a lot of drama because kind of the people knew that the match was going to be postponed until the next day after that tiebreak ends. And it was a tussle. It was going back and forth. I don't think there was like a clear better player at this point. I think that statistic says it all. I think they both looked to be dominant from the baseline. They both looked to, have their strengths be the ones that really matter. And it was a tussle. It was a 50-50 match that went through to the distance. And there was one point where you could see, Rafa is having kind of the best looks on return, fifth set. Oh, he has his break point. Oh, he kind of has and arrives at Wimbledon with all the momentum from the year, from the big picture. So, hey, Rafa's having those chances at the fifth set. He's going to win it. He's the one with the best momentum mentally. But then Novak comes and says, you know what? What happened? What happened in Rome happened. What happened in Madrid happened. What happened? It happened. I'm going to win this match and I'm going to be back. And I don't care if you have a break point at 7-8 and it feels kind of that you're going to win the match. No, it doesn't care. That was the beauty of it. So what can I say about the previous 4.5 hours? Tennis at its best, mate.
Damien?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually part of this sort of like group of people who kind of don't appreciate this much as much as it should be. I'm not doing it willingly because I realized recently that yeah, I guess it's just the fact that yes, it was played over 2 days. It's just not as much of a compelling experience. It's not something you
Yeah.
can watch from straight to finish, and I think that changes a great deal actually. But yeah, I enjoyed rewatching the highlights today. Definitely, I obviously know the points that we're going to talk about a lot, and yeah, I think it's also in the broader sort of like sense, like we were mentioning the Federer Nadal match and how it kind of rushed the fact that we already had the technology, but we didn't have Hawkeye yet in the matches, and that made it happen more or less. This one, and more specifically that day, also led to us today having all these fifth set tie breaks, right, at the slams and the unified rules. Because
Right.
yeah, Anderson and Isner played for 6 hours. And I think this is also really important in the sense that for this match, we also could ask a third question because this is the first one we're talking about that wasn't in the final. So the third question would be, if Rafa wins this match, does he win the title? And I think from
Right.
all of us, the answer would be 5 out of 5
Yeah.
because Kevin Anderson was just like dead in the final. And it literally didn't matter who was going to play him there, Novak or Rafa, it would be the same outcome. So yeah, I mean, if we're kind of asking that question as well, that adds to the importance of this match, of this breakpoint, of course.
Definitely. So they get to 7-all. They get to deuce in a match, as Carlos highlighted, just couldn't be tighter in so many respects. And of course, at this point, one false shot, one incredible moment, or one false move, maybe, can decide this tennis match. And it gets to 7-all. Deuce. Rafa hits an incredible forehand. It's called out. But thanks to Hawkeye, it ends up getting called in, clipping the line. So now Rafa has that elusive or crucial break point. And of course, if he wins this next point, he'll go up 8-7 and will serve for the match. A rally that I made a few notes today that basically began with Rafa on the back foot and was on the back foot until he hits a really good deep backhand that gets it back to neutral. He then gets up in the rally and decides to make his move, goes to the net in a move that in the post-match press conference, Ubaldo described as a bit maybe impatient. Sometimes I think Ubaldo doesn't really know quite what to say or how to word it exactly, and he can be a bit loose. And you can imagine Rafa's response. Rafa had already spent 5 minutes of batting away, question. He wasn't in a good mood. Of course he wasn't, but also some of the questions were a bit carelessly put. And then the king of carelessness, Ubaldo goes in with his big feet and says, yeah, that was a bit impatient, weren't it? And basically Rafa says, well, he probably wouldn't change anything. Or maybe it's easy to say after the event, but whatever. He goes into the net. Still, Novak has a question that needs to be answered, and it's not an easy question. Basically, there's only a few spots on the court that he can hit. So Rafa's maths, at least, was done right, in my opinion. But Novak does hit that spot and gets back to deuce. Carlos?
I think a good question to ask is, would have mattered if Rafa hits that approach targeted to Novak's backhand instead of Novak's forehand? I mean, was it the right choice to go to his forehand? I don't think it was a bad choice per se. Maybe the shot could have had a little bit more of I don't know, precision, weight to it. But in terms of direction of the shot, I think it was kind of the right choice to make because you kind of force Novak to hit that short angle, which is not an easy shot to hit. Maybe he has more time than Rafa wishes he could have, but it's still a high risk shot. So you make your move. Maybe you could have been like a little bit more aggressive in it, but in terms of direction, I think it's the choice to make because I mean Novak's backhand when he's passing someone, it's like laser precision. Like
He's 70-30 up in the rally, and he's still 70-30 up at that moment, maybe even slightly more. I don't know.
And even if you let him have like a 5%, and it goes from 70-30 to 65-35, something like that, it's still, you're in the prime position to win that rally. So it's, maybe you could argue that the aggressiveness of that shot wasn't that good, but the placement of the shot, I think, is the right shot to make. But then again, I mean, you come up against Djokovic. It's not you come up against, I don't know, Gobind Nanda. You know, it's you kind of you know what you're dealing with. You know.
Yeah.
Sorry, Gobind.
Playing right now against Ozan Baris.
Especially now he's not here. Yeah.
You guys are going to be watching this, at some other point. So obviously that Govind Nanda, well, maybe he's also going to be playing. But yeah, for me, rewatching this today, Nadal in the rally was like up against it from the very first moment. And this is literally the first chance he has, like first shot he can actually attack. I don't know, maybe going line, I was thinking about it there, but to me, the shot seems right. I mean, he literally just saw that he finally has a shot he can crack it. He approaches the net. Most of the time, you're going to win the point like this. Should the approach shot have a bit more width on it? Yes, absolutely. Is it still a very tough shot that Novak hits? And by the way, like today, especially watching this, I was just struck by how similar this is to the shot that wins in Wimbledon next year. And it's literally the same. Of course, this time it's Nadal cross-court approach. There it's Federer with an inside in, but it's virtually the same. And I think in both cases, the play is absolutely fine from both Roger and Rafa. They probably could have played it a bit closer to the line, made it even tougher for Novak. Then again, I think the match point in 2012, Federer wins on like exactly the same shot. He wins the match against Murray there, and I don't think the approach is even that much better. Like the reality is, most of the time, these sort of plays win you the point. And Rafa, I think especially, you can really understand this decision here because, well, he was defending the entire point. And suddenly he gets his chance. So he moves in. He does it quickly. There's no hesitation whatsoever. And yeah, sometimes the opponent just hits something ridiculous. And in that case, he did.
I think this shot was a little bit more difficult for Djokovic to hit than the Federer's one, but they are kind of like in the same level of difficulty. I agree with you, but just wanted to quick point that out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Vanch,
and there was a moment of slight hesitation, but as he's trying to go forward to the net, like you could tell he kind of thought about it. And it's like, no, I'm going in, because that was that was the final moment that was the only time in the rally where he actually had the edge, and so he's like, okay, I got to go in. And he was hitting his backhand really well all match. Like that was something that stood out to me. Also watching the highlights is just like how well he was hitting the backhand, especially the line cross. It was a really good like baseline performance from Nadal. I think Djokovic edged it out in terms of the serve and return. That's where he was able to make up this whatever slight 2% difference.
He needs that backhand. He needs that backhand to work, especially on grass against Djokovic. It's the joker play for Rafa in terms of patterns within that rivalry. So great to point that out, Vanch.
Yeah, and he wants to be able to flatten that out, have that option at his disposal, and try to finish at the net with it, which he's normally very good at. And nobody else is going to make that shot apart from Djokovic. The forehand cross court has now become like a legacy defining shot in his. In his career. Like, I mean, 2011 US Open semis against Roger, he hits that ridiculous forehand cross. Like no one else is hitting these shots, and in these really big match point, break point situations against these two guys. So that's really.
So the question is, Vanch, if Rafa wins this point, so he goes up 8-7 and serves for the match, does he win the match?
I'm going to say it's pretty likely because of like I said, he wasn't sitting as well as Novak was.
We know that he gets broken, but does he get broken because he's serving to stay in the match?
Because of the mental, side after you miss
and
that.
Also then having the mental side of having been so close to winning the match.
Exactly.
Thinking about that one point, is he even if we pretty much back his decisions, is he thinking maybe I shouldn't have gone to the net, maybe I should have been more patient?
I think that point plays a huge part in him getting broken afterwards. I do believe that. Yeah.
So, I mean, I know, Carlos, because we spoke about this last year, that you think that he does serve it out. So,
yes.
Yeah.
He serves it out as well. Yeah. I think he serves it out and probably wins the title as well. Well, actually, for sure wins the title.
I mean, I've put a 1A and a 1B because 1A is does he win the match? Damien, does he win the match if he wins this point?
I mean, we're not oracles, so we can't really say with full certainty that he serves it out or not. I mean, this is just guesswork. However, we can.
We spent
say,
1 hour
you
and
know,
9 minutes being oral.
Yeah, 1 hour and 1 minute answering this question, then
No. But I just mean we cannot say, you know, to me, like, we cannot say I think he serves it out. I mean, we can say that, you know, he would have a very good chance at serving it out because, you know, in the entire match he was only broken a few times because he's serving on grass, because he's got the mental momentum or whatever. So I think if we gave Miami 4, I mean, this is clearly at least 4.5. I don't know if you can quite give it a 5 because, like, that would indicate 100% certainty, right?
I mean, I'm actually giving it a 4. I'm not I'm not as convinced about it as Miami.
Why?
For me, this is the most convincing. Like, of the 5 that we're doing, like, this is the
Miami
one where
wasn't even a break yet. It was love 40, and
love 40.
You would also have to serve it out.
Yeah.
I mean, probably Rafa has also the crowd
But
on
there
his
he'd
side
have to
as well.
serve it. There he'd have to serve it out 2 sets to love up and a break. Whereas here, you know,
okay,
he
that's an argument. Okay,
back. So, and
okay.
because he does,
okay,
he does
yeah.
get broken. Because he does get broken in the next game. But
that's fair. No, that I actually don't
But
think at
Miami
all.
versus Wimbledon.
But that's
Miami
fair about
versus-
being 2 sets up and still having so much time, even if you lose the next game. Still, I would go 4.5. I mean, it can't be a 5, but
what are you going for, Vanch? What score?
I think I'll go over a 4.5 as well, because this is the closest where, like, he's going to be serving for the whole. He's going to be serving for the match, whereas the others are like, you know, maybe he gets.
It's between 4 and 4.5. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, we can give it 4.5.
Let's go with 4.5 because, Djokovic 2018 up until this point. If Rafa gets that break, mentally that's a tough task, even for Djokovic's standards. So yeah, maybe 4.5. Yeah.
Okay, 4.5 out of 5, and we're almost just forgetting the final. We're just basically saying this is championship point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So legacy wise, it's probably the biggest, right? He gets 3
legacy wise.
Just quickly, I want to say, Kevin Anderson, if you want to comment below this video and give us the reasons why you would have beaten Rafa Nadal in that final, please do. And
I think even Kevin Anderson would say I would have had no chance because, you know, he would just say, like, fatigue, you know. And maybe it would be possible for him to beat Rafa in a best of 3 match in the final, but not in a best of 5. It's just impossible.
Maybe Rafa gets injured. Don't know.
Okay. I'm sure.
Maybe it's like a Rafa against Wawrinka sort of situation.
Yeah, we don't have the 2014 Australian Open on this list, but
there is no. That would be more in a sort of general matches that basically were Rafa and got away rather than
the build up to the final would have been eerily similar to the build up of the Australian Open 2014 final. I do agree with that. Yes, but yeah.
And so legacy wise, if Nadal has another Wimbledon in his pocket and Novak has one less, and of course, if Nadal has another Grand Slam in his pocket and Novak has one less, I mean, it's the same as, in terms of Grand Slams, at least, it's the same as Australia. But are we putting more value on Wimbledon than the Australian Open? Is that what we're doing, Vanch?
Yes, I think we are, because the thing is, you know, they each had at their most dominant slams, they each had one where the other was so close to winning but didn't get it on the lesser preferred surface. But this is kind of the neutral surface, if you can call it that, in terms of the rivalry, where they had the fewest matches. And I think this being the most important one, this could have changed. This could have made the slam count even. This could have made the head-to-head even. This could have, you know, maybe even impacted how much to what extent does Djokovic's renaissance continue. Like, to me, this is the most legacy defining one. If Nadal doesn't get the 2022 Australian Open, then hands down 2012 Australian Open is number one. What if?
Yeah,
but for me,
agree.
But I think Wimbledon, 3 Wimbledons versus 2 is.
I mean, I'm going 4.5, but I'm okay to go 5.
I'm going 5.
I'm going with 5. This is easy for me.
Damien?
I wanted to say it's really important, so it's like a 3.5 or 4. I'll just settle for 4 then. But yeah, I mean, what you guys said, you know, Wimbledon last final for Rafa was 2011, which is a pretty crazy stat, all things considered. He also had the streak of losses, which we all know: Rosol, Darcy's, Kyrgios, Miller, Brown. Of course, Miller, Brown the other way. But anyway, yeah, I think for that reason, it's kind of bigger. It's simply, you know, having even one more final, or in this case, 99% a title if he wins this match. Yeah, it's definitely much bigger than the Australian Open stuff we talked about. And if you guys want to go 4.5, I'm very fine with that.
I'm going 4.5. I think I'm okay with 5 though. Just in terms if we want to, you know.
So did you both want to say 5 or?
Those two want to say 5.
I go with 5.
Yeah.
I was like 4, so let's do 4.5 then average wise, I guess.
Yeah.
4.6,
Sure,
4.7.
4.75.
Anyway,
it's not even for Rafa's legacy. This match is vital for Novak's legacy.
Oh, it is, yeah.
For me, it's like
it is, yeah.
Maybe, I mean, in terms of what this match, the importance of this match in terms of Rafa's 2018, he ends up winning the US Open anyway. It's not like it really affects him for the rest of the year. But then again, you gotta ask yourself, where does Novak Djokovic lands after the Cecchinatos match and then losing such a close, tight-knit match against his biggest rival?
He's mentioned
how does that impact Novak's mind for the rest of the year? Maybe he takes the rest of the year off. He doesn't want to know anything about tennis for like
4 years later in a press conference. He's still talking about that 2018 Wimbledon being a huge turning point.
Yeah, how much does his resurgence like sort of get delayed?
Yeah,
I
think not by much. Like who else was going to win US Open 2018? But still, it's a factor. Yeah,
I think it's a huge deal for him. I think just mentally he kind of reinforces his belief that he's back to winning ways against the very best. Because maybe he wins Wimbledon against, I don't know, Isner semifinal, Anderson the final. Maybe it's not that important. But then winning that match against Rafa is like, man, I'm back. I'm back where I belong. I think he needed that. Had he not got that, that's a good question to have. So that's why for me it's a 5.
Cool. The last one on our list, maybe the most contentious for various reasons in whether it deserves to be on the list or not. I've gone for the French Open 2021. Again, Djokovic Nadal, this time in a semi-final at the French Open. And Nadal races into a 5-love lead before I think Djokovic reels him in a little bit, gets to 5-3, and Nadal just gets over the line. But the momentum that Djokovic has sort of swung in that match, he certainly carries into the second set and takes that set as well. We're seeing some epic, very long rallies that are, when you were talking about the physicality of some of their matches, I still think even if this one didn't quite go the long term in terms of the match itself altogether, but also in terms of obviously not going 5, I still think this was a very grueling match. And it comes down to, in particular, the third set, the defining set of the match, as it turns out, really. And they exchange breaks here. I think Djokovic was serving for this set, but Nadal breaks. Ends up a situation where at 5-6, and Djokovic is serving to stay in the third set. Nadal has a set point. On this set point, Rafa referenced in his press conference afterwards, saying he did regret how he played it. I think in particular the way he returned the second serve of Novak. Novak ends up winning that point and holding his serve. Then there's the tie break, which is on serve at 4-3, or I should say 3-4, because Nadal is serving, and Nadal has a horrible, horrible volley that I... If I was having tennis lessons and I hit a volley like that, my tennis coach would be going, "You're doing this all wrong." And I always think of, listen, I know I've done it wrong. I know I've technically done it wrong. I know I've messed up. You don't need to tell me that. And I look at Rafa's face when he puts his hands to his face like that after that point, and it's exactly the same. Ends up going 5-3, and Novak ends up taking the set. Vanch, I'm going to come to you first. I know that you're probably more skeptical about this one, maybe more than the other four, right? In terms of its justification, in terms of being 1 point, being a crucial one to win the match or lose it, etc., right?
Yeah, I mean, personally, the third set is one of the best sets you'll ever see in terms of like quality individual set wise in the rivalry. This was pretty high up there. Maybe at number one in terms of both playing pretty well at the same time. And the set point that you referenced at 5-6, Djokovic serving to stay in it. I think Nadal probably regrets that he didn't hit the return deep enough because Djokovic was kind of in control of that point from the middle of the court, and then he's able to hit that drop shot. Nadal so far behind the baseline, trying to chase it down, but doesn't really get enough of his racket on it, and so as a result, he loses that set point. And then the 4-3, where Nadal's serving at 3-4. It was just a very weird point, like just the way it played out, because it looked like first Djokovic was definitely going to have an easy volley on top of the net, and then suddenly it somehow turns around and Nadal has the easy volley so quickly that I have to believe he just probably just didn't really give the volley much thought, because he was just like, okay, yeah, I've got this point one, and then he just totally made a mess of it. And I remember his reaction that he put his just face in his hands, just couldn't believe it. But even then, it's 4-all. He still has to win one more point after that. So it's not like it wasn't like for a mini break or anything. But that's one in terms of like in his career. The reason why I'm not so sure about even if Nadal wins this set, I'm not sure physically he would have had what it takes to even squeeze out one more set, just because Djokovic was looking so much better physically, and Rafa did go on to have those foot problems, which would basically take him out of the rest of the season.
Yeah, indeed. Carlos?
Yeah, I think the two questions that you are asking right now, the first one, maybe this is the less clear answer in terms of does Rafa win this match? If he wins that first set, he's up 2-1. But we know that as the match went on, it was Djokovic that was kind of having that physical edge over Rafa. Maybe Rafa was lacking a little of match sharpness, so to say, even though he went toe-to-toe against Novak. And I think this win is huge for Novak in terms of their rivalry, because you could say, okay, Novak won against him in Roland Garros, but that was 2015. Rafa was off. He wasn't himself. So he kind of needed that clay best of 5 win against Rafa. So maybe for Novak it's important, yes. But for Rafa, does it change it all? I think he got Novak pretty well both in 2020 and 2022. That revenge in 2022 makes it less painful, I think, this match. So for both in terms of significance and in terms of how much does that point impact the rest of the match, I think this is not as important as the other ones. However, I think it's well put in the top 5, well placed in the top 5. I would rank it similarly alongside the Miami one. Yes, Rafa could have won that match. Yes, maybe Novak he can't boast as much of winning against Rafa in Roland Garros, but in terms of general significance, not that huge, I think.
Okay, Damien?
Yeah, we have like 2 points here. I mean, the volley happens 3-4 down in the breaker. He doesn't have to lose the tiebreak after it. He doesn't have to win the tiebreak after it if he makes it. The set point, surely, when we watched it today, because you guys don't know it, but we watched it like 3 minutes before we started the show. And yeah, he's just very passive on it. He doesn't do all that much. Novak has all that space to come up with the drop shot, which is good. But then again, yeah, you would like a little bit more initiative from Rafa on that point. But yeah, all in all, I'm also not like convinced that he would have won the match anyway. Obviously, he was seen on crutches basically a couple of days later. So yeah, I think his physicality was pretty shaky as well. Of course, this is not the topic of the show, but I was just thinking just about the fact that the year after, you could kind of do a similar show on like points that changed Rafa's career in a positive way, and then it would be Zverev twisting his ankle, and like how impactful was that? So like, does Rafa win the match if that point doesn't happen? And that's of course like a foil show.
And Damien, even though we're not oracles, you have told me you think Zverev goes on to win that match.
That's how it was looking at the time. Yeah, that's how it was looking. That like he probably will have more left than Rafa if he takes that set. Because if he goes 2 sets to love down, then probably not. But if it's split 1-1, I would have trusted him a little bit more physically. Like that's my idea. And actually, with physicality, we can sometimes, I think, go for that and actually say that yeah, someone was going to have more in the tank. Like that's something we can maybe almost estimate. Whereas
Yeah.
like what happens in the point right after that, what happens in 3 points later, that's not something we can really guess. So I guess you haven't really like caught me on a lie here, although I was scared there for a moment.
The physical element, though, actually, we can now dial it back to this match because actually,
Yeah.
when it comes to our two questions, I think actually on the second question, if I understood you right, Carlos, we're going to disagree, but we'll come to that in a second. Oh, hello. I think so if I do that, some balloons appear. That's nothing to do with me disagreeing with Carlos.
Happy birthday, John.
No. It was
You
my
had your birthday
birthday.
in October, though, right?
I do, but it was 6 days ago.
Sorry, I didn't remember which day.
No big deal. You didn't check out my Twitter page that day, clearly, because I know on Twitter you get a thing and it says, "Oh, it's no." Carlos, I've known you for 18 months or whatever, and I've never wished you happy. You've had at least
yeah,
one.
well,
birthday.
we're even.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
even.
now
Yeah, yeah.
It's making me feel less bad about it. Okay, good.
So the physicality side, I think actually because of we can see how much that took out of Rafa, and we saw the situation with his foot, and we saw how little he played for the rest of that year. When it comes to the first question, even if we give Rafa one of those 2 points we just mentioned, and even if we give him the set, obviously one of those being a set point, the other one would have just made it 4-all. But it's just such an interesting point with the way Rafa messes up in such a black and white manner that I probably honed in on that one a bit more. But even if we give Rafa that set, I'm still thinking Novak's the favorite to win that match because of what we know. I think it's difficult because, there's a mental side of it, and you go into, you feel maybe Rafa can somehow hold on to that break he has at the beginning of the fourth, but why doesn't he hold on to it anyway? I mean, he's got a good chance now of maybe making it 2 sets all, but yeah, I'm not convinced that Novak doesn't go on to win that match, even if Rafa wins that third set, as epic as it was and as important as it probably felt at the time.
Yeah, maybe favorite is too big of a word. Like, after all, you are 1 set to 2 down against the most dominant player in Clay's tennis history. But there's a positive chance that Novak ends up winning that match because of the way he was feeling, the way he was prepared to go
more
to
positive
war
than
against
any
Rafa.
of the other 4 matches that we've just mentioned.
Yes, exactly.
If those points had changed and it goes love 40, for example, in Miami, or if Rafa's serving for the match,
he's less close to winning that match than all of the other matches.
And we also know what Rafa's condition was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree.
And also legacy wise, I mean, the opponent in the final is also much tougher here than, like, let's say Wimbledon 2018.
We don't know if Rafa goes on to win the tournament, even unlike Wimbledon, as you say.
I mean, we didn't even know. We even had questions about Djokovic, right? Like, how would he, back it up in the final?
I thought he would win, but then when he's down 2 sets to love. And again, if we talk about can Rafa physically get through another set that night, again, I think it's a stretch, but maybe. Can he get through a set that night and then 5 again on Sunday? Bearing in mind, we're talking, the foot he just couldn't move.
Yeah. Whereas in 2022, he was getting it numbed before every match. And so it was like...
Yeah, maybe he would have done something. I had actually thought about that recently, actually. I did think that maybe he would contact his doctor and get it just fixed for that final and maybe not pick up a racket again for the rest of the year. But I don't know, Damien?
Considering he was going to be playing Steph in the final, I guess he still would have found a way somehow.
I agree.
Steph 2020.
I agree, but it's not like Anderson or Frere, where it's like...
No, it's not. No, it's not the same. No, obviously Stefan is also almost won sort of the Djokovic final. He was gonna feel pretty confident. I just don't know if he would have really stepped it up, especially in a matchup that's kind of tough, from the get go, given the patterns and everything. But yeah, it's definitely also a huge one for the Djokovic legacy, as Carlos I think mentioned earlier. Yeah, just the fact that he almost won the calendar slam, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. And that's why I thought you and I maybe slightly disagreed, Carlos, because of the legacy factor. Because actually, I think that I thought that was the day that the slam race and goat race, whatever you want to call it, was decided. As it turned out, there was going to be 1 or 2 more twists.
Okay. Yeah.
But I thought that day when he wins that third set and goes on to win the match and then ultimately wins that second, he was desperate to win that second French Open for quite some time. And he was desperate in the first one. He's obviously very keen on getting these statistics racked up and fair enough. But he desperately learning, improving his French year on year and giving post-match, speeches in French, and just from every single element, I just thought he's absolutely, he would have certainly sacrificed parts of the season, but made sure that he was in peak condition he could possibly be for the French, and he was desperate to get one over his biggest rival in his backyard. And I thought at the time, and still do to some extent, I don't know, maybe he still only has one French Open, maybe he doesn't win a third.
You think if he loses this one, he doesn't win French Open again?
2023, don't know.
Okay.
Don't know.
Okay.
It's a lot of ifs. Yeah, Carlos.
Semifinals.
Yeah.
Cramps, full body cramps, third set.
Yeah, but like he clearly wasn't ready. Would that change if Djokovic had one less
maybe
slam?
Novak feels more pressure. Maybe Novak goes down.
Maybe Novak wins Wimbledon, which Carlos won. So
yeah,
we don't know, right?
But I did think it was huge for the legacy at the time.
It's a fair point.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point. I think without knowing that Australian Open is going to come around and like there's going to be something more at least for Rafa. Yeah. And also without knowing that the final is going to be so close, right? Because probably at the time watching it, you're thinking, okay, so Djokovic just has this title. Like it's not, as we said, it's not a Kevin Anderson scenario at Wimbledon, but at the time you would have thought it's probably going to be. So yeah. That makes sense.
I actually was not sure, like 100%, if he would win that final. Like I had some questions.
No, Vance, come on.
Going in. Yeah, really? Because Steph was really, really good on clay in 2021. Like he played Rafa and
I thought Novak would win it, pretty confident, but certainly after 2 sets, I didn't think the same thing.
Yeah, like when he went in 2 sets, you thought, okay, maybe it's going to be really hard to come back.
I don't even mean any disrespect to Stefanos now, but I think at the time it was just considered, okay, yeah, so this is the final.
I'm trying to give it like a score in terms of one of the points or even the game, or even if we give that set, I'm really thinking of like a 2 out of 5 or 1.5 out of 5.
1.5 I would give it, because didn't we give 2 to 1 to one of the, maybe not, but yeah, for me it's a 1.
No, I think the lowest we gave was for Australia.
But if you look at the set point, like if you look at the set point, Rafa takes the set point and then he's 2-1. I would say at least a 2.5. Then
well, in which case we go
50-50.
Yeah, 2.5 feels right, I think.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go 2 then, but collectively, does that make us closer to 2? I think it does. Than 2. If he's going 1.5 and I'm going 2, and you guys go 2.5.
Oh, you're going 1.5. Oh wow.
And I was tempted to go 1.5. So I think overall,
go 2 then. Yeah, go 2 then. Average wise,
the legacy I've put 3 out of 5, but on the day itself, I'd have probably given it like a 5.5 out of 5. But because of what happens afterwards. But if Novak is now on 2 French Opens, because this is also about stymieing, if you like, the Novak. Yeah. But I've given it 3 out of 5.
Double career slam for Novak. Double career slam for Novak, even though he's 1 behind Roger.
That was the most important thing, winning the double career Grand Slam, because that was at that point it set him apart from
it did.
in terms of the Rafa comparison.
And beating Rafa and then actually going on and winning, which he didn't do in 2015, and then in 2016 he didn't have to face Rafa. So
yeah.
But that's legacy for Novak rather than Rafa, right?
Yeah,
it is.
Which is connected.
No, but at that point we didn't know Rafa was going to have 2022, so like it really let him down.
Right. I've given it a 3 out of 5. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, 3 out of 5. Yeah, because we are kind of balancing what
I'm fine with that. Yeah,
because
and then
I've got 2 more things I want to raise, but I do want to get this wrapped up. I'm just going to give an honorable mention to the ATP Tour Finals and him serving for the match against Medvedev. And also there was a crazy point in that where he just has to win this point, and Daniel Medvedev is apologetic. In fact, so much so that he actually apologizes before the ball even lands. It's quite funny. It's Daniel Medvedev. Rafa just can't believe his misfortune.
Oh, you're joking me. Complete mishit. Nothing Nadal could do. That one must hurt.
If Rafa wins that match, does he win an ATP Tour Finals beating Dominic Thiem in the final? 50-50.
Is that the ATP Finals when he lost to Thiem?
Yes, that was the ATP Finals where he lost to Thiem 7-6, 7-6.
Yeah, and he also lost to him in Australia that year as well.
Yeah. But
Choose
it's
your
a
answer,
final.
I guess.
It's
It's
a different
50.
monster.
It's 50-50. It's the final
Yes.
as well. Medvedev
Yeah.
obviously beats Team in the final.
But that was the best chance for Rafa to win an ATP
Yeah.
finals. That's for sure.
I
That's for
think
sure.
so.
Even
I
though
think
it's a 50-50 in the finals, that's the best chance Rafa has of winning an ATP finals for sure.
Definitely.
Because earlier
Um,
he got the best 2 ATP finals players ever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question basically is if Rafa wins 2018 Wimbledon, is that enough to propel him ahead in any GOAT arguments?
Well, if it's 23-23, then we have a conversation, I guess.
And then it's 30-30, right? In the head-to-head,
And then
or because
30-30.
that matters.
If he wins these 2 points, the one at the net in Wimbledon 2018, and he puts that backhand down the line and it lands just inside the line as opposed to just outside the line, those 2 points are enough to
Probably
It's
yes.
Probably
Yeah.
yes.
Probably yes, because then that also
Yeah.
affects like year-end number ones, like even other something like 2018.
Maybe
and-
weeks.
Well, yeah, but then the seedings also are different. That's
of course they
And it
are.
changes everything. But if we do
But
like
it
a quick
changes,
math,
If we did the
Yeah.
quick maths right
Yes.
now, and even
If-
to be honest with you, even if Novak goes on and wins 5 more slams, Rafa will just say, "Well, I retired at the top." If Rafa retired the day of the French Open final of 2022
Mm.
and just went,
Nah, that I don't think that
No.
actually changes anything. Yeah.
I disagree. Yes, I disagree
Right.
because you ultimately look at the slams race after
Pete
all,
Sampras retired at the top as well, and
and
so
Pete
But
Sampras was
yeah,
completely
but
right.
because Pete Sampras and these other guys never, I think Sampras fans don't care about this. If they're just huge, they don't care about the slam race, do they?
I think they cared when Roger
When
was getting
Federer
14,
took maybe
15.
that
When
day.
he was overtaking him, I think they cared. Andy Roddick that day especially. I think that was huge. Pete sitting in the stands, of course. But yeah, I mean, by now they don't care because they don't really have any arguments anymore, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Rafa has that much in one slam, so it's
Yeah, indeed, he does,
Yeah.
Vanch.
just
And
To add
yeah,
insult to injury, Vanch Verwani.
well,
Sorry,
it's not,
Sampras
I think
fans.
Pete's okay with that. I mean, Pete never, of course, won the French Open. Maybe there's a show out there to see a parallel.
Pete's missing the career Grand Slam to actually be in the conversation. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and also, he wasn't close, was he? I don't think he was close.
no, I think best he
couple
got
of
was
semifinals.
finals.
Semi-finals.
Semi, yeah, but
Which is the
just
same as
one,
Tim
no?
Henman. Tim Henman got to a semi-finals at the French Open as well. So.
yeah,
was
but like
against,
at the time there was no one else who could actually still stand up to him. Like it doesn't matter that Andre had all 4 slams because he only had 8 of them in total, right?
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
at the time it wasn't a requirement to have all 4 slams because basically no one else did. I mean, Rod Laver obviously could be the GOAT even still to this day, like considering, if you just start looking at like data from the past and I don't know, take some
Only
different.
there was a website that we could check out that data.
Yeah, for example,
Oh,
like
yeah.
the list that Jeff did, like was it Rod Laver first eventually?
I think
don't
at the
remember.
time, maybe, yeah. But I think, of course, I actually said to him earlier this year, I said basically, does it matter if Novak plays 100 matches more and loses 99? Does that damage him in terms of the data? And he said, no, actually, the one win will actually help him progress, if you like. So maybe Novak has overtaken, because I think it's a couple of years ago he did that list. Listen, best to bring this to a close because it's well over an hour and a half now, and we could easily go on forever when it comes to GOAT debates, etc. And yeah, so big thanks to Vanch Vermani for joining us today.
Yeah, it was awesome. I had a lot of fun.
Cool. Carlos as well.
Thanks for having me, John, and as usual, a pleasure being here with you guys. Even though for some the GOAT debates are pointless, but hey, we have fun.
Indeed. And a pleasure for Carlos. Vanch had fun. What about for you, Damien?
No, I am one of these people who think GOAT debates are pointless, but I don't think we are doing just that here.
No, we won't.
I
Yeah,
think we
absolutely.
definitely took it from angles that did interest me as well. So I did enjoy it, probably more than I expected. Actually, there are some times when I enter a show and I'm not really sure what it's going to be about. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be talking about. But this one, yes, pretty quickly I got into the groove.
I think I just said just follow my lead and it'll work fine. But angles is a great way to finish it on, because angles was very much the word really behind this entire episode, really. Especially the cross court pass.
Yeah.
Short angles. Yeah.
Indeed. On that note, you know the drill. If there's one match from Rafa's story where you think that was a missed opportunity, there was a big chance.
We have matches,
2
or 3 in Australian Open. No more. We lose the opportunity in Wimbledon against Djokovic in semi-final.
2018.
Then we lose the opportunity, more important because that was semi-final. We lose the opportunity in Australian Open. In the Australian Open 2014, 2012, and 2017.
Yeah.
In 14 because he has an injury against Wawrinka that before he had never lose against him. Then with Djokovic and Federer, he had breakup in the fifth.
Yeah.
And 40-30 or the 30-50. I don't remember well. It was a ball very close, goes. But this is what happened. There was in Roland Garros 2009. Of course, he I am sure that he won. He will win. He won this tournament when he has no problems in his knee, because at this moment he was the best. He won Australian Open, then he won the tournaments on clay, and he arrived with problems in Roland Garros, and for this reason, in my opinion, he loses. But there are others time that maybe he has to lose and he won.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.